something against. And
I have pressed record.
all right, so we're starting with the premise of.
So the premise of a story, a script that is basically supposed. I have pressed record.
All right, so we're starting with the premise of.
So the premise of a story, a script that is basically supposed to be built around this woman who has a black father and a white mother, and she's in her mid-20s, and by the time she's developed into an adult, she has this sort of like self-acknowledged I don't know, it's not phobia, like it's a complex vilifying kind of black men because of her relationship with her father and her brother.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that dynamic specifically reflects a much broader dynamic of sort of something I've observed as a white man, and not in these two identity groups, but of a rift or a major tension between black men and black women. But the the thing that I was hoping like a script could analyze is like, you know, the kind of like toxicity of masculinity, but also the kind of like humanity of black men, but also like the, you know, the unjustified attitude, but that's also is justified from that character, the woman who's, you know, she's a black woman, but she, uh, you know, has a white experience and a black experience at the same time. Anyway, um, uh, that's just my initial kind of like context for where whatever we talk about
Mm-hmm.
like might be drawn into a script, or you know, that's what I'm oriented towards.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's just a lot. Like, just not like the dynamic of the black family, because like there's, I mean, in that specific situation, I feel like sometimes people like they have like an animosity against their siblings, and then it carries out into their relationships or their parents, and it spills out into all the relationships of that person's gender, of that same person's gender that they have something against. And that's one thing, but it's what? Oh yeah, it's one thing, and but it's also like, I would say that like I feel like in the black community, like it's this weird thing where black women are all, I feel like it's weird, that black women are always well, they're uplifting black men almost like they're victims, and like they go out there in society and they're victimized, but like almost not like forgetting about themselves. Like it's, I feel like just being a black woman, like it is harder. Like I don't
Do you know?
like it's harder in the way that there's a lot of single women out there taking care of taking care of their children. Unfortunately, there's a lot of black men that are incarcerated, so that creates a single parent household. And just if a man is incarcerated and he comes back, he's like, it's almost expected where they'll come back and everything's set up for them. Like they'll, and it's, I mean, it's nice because I feel like you do have to welcome that person back, but I just feel like just black women put themselves to the side for black men, and black men don't really appreciate black women. It's like they,
Where does that come from?
I feel like it comes from like a sense of entitlement that's put on them from their black women. Like it's it's instilled that in them basically. It's instilled on them. It's instilled in them basically from the time that they're born. So
I had this sort of interesting conversation with a friend who's a black man where he was pointing to, I guess, a hypocrisy where which sort of surprised me, where he was saying, you know, people rallying around these men on death row, like he said that like if that person had been like a white person, there wouldn't be so much rallying around or rallying behind, you know, like preventing the death row, which I thought was very, that's not a logic that I like would have, and I think maybe, you know, I instantly was like, oh well, is he referring to mostly sort of like outspoken black women who are defending these people? Like that was where my mind went,
no,
you know.
I feel like my mind goes to like just like romanticizing and then almost like a savior complex of like, even though I feel like society kind of like picks and chooses like which black people are worth saving, and I don't know, like if it was, I mean, I'm sure there are, I don't know how, there's a lot of people on death row and of many different races, but I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's a pretty extreme
Yeah,
example. Sorry,
yeah,
that just happened the other day.
Yeah,
So
it's just weird. Like I don't know,
context.
Like how we decide as like society who's that newsworthy.
Right.
It's just really weird.
Right. Yeah. Well, there is that kind of like phenomenon of like, okay, everybody's focusing on this right now, and this is what you're supposed to like. Here's the new line that you stand behind. Okay, everybody. You know.
But there is kind of like almost like it's very predictable. Like if someone's kidnapped, it's gonna be like, and it's gonna be in the news. It's gonna be like a white person, or if it's a crime, it's probably gonna be, and it's on the news, it's gonna be a black person. Like it's
right. Yeah.
so
There's
almost,
like these
yeah.
like these inherent sort of like reproduced narratives that like the media seems to kind of perpetuate, where it's like, well, the only time that we post this type of, you know, crime is when it fits this context.
Or maybe the media decides to focus on black people so much because they are incarcerated so much, and they're like, hey, we're trying, like this, we were wrong about this one. I don't know, like right. I feel like it's strange. Like right. It really is strange.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know if you had anything specific like coming into the topic that you wanted to talk about.
Just, I would say that like even in the dynamic of like my family, I feel like my brother just, I mean, granted he is older than me, but my mother like shows him more respect than me. Like I feel like my word is not really valid at all. Like we could be saying the same thing, but he'll like, his word is like law basically. and it's very it's very interesting. Or like when we had Thanksgiving dinner and like my mother wanted to, like, we prayed or whatever, we said grace, and my cousin Terrence, he was like the only guy there, and she's like, "Oh, Terrence, you're the man here, so say grace." I'm like, anybody could say grace. Like it
Right.
doesn't like
Right.
it's not like it's not like, oh, God's like, women are speaking.
Right,
Like
right.
I cannot hear them. Like,
Right.
like
Well, we live in such a patriarchal society. That's part of what kind of like uh, uh, is pretty clear to me, is that like there's, a cross section and intersection, to use Kimberly Crenshaw's language, intersectionality, but there's an intersection of race and gender that creates these two dynamics of a different experience between black men and black women, right? And the sort of like entitlement that's granted men in the society, regardless of race, kind of leads to a rift between men and women within, intra-race, racial relationships. But like there's this sort of like completely awful, misplaced sort of like vilification of black women, that does relate directly to kind of I think black men feeling either more vulnerable in the larger context of like outside of just being black, by their association with black women, and therefore kind of like distance themselves. I don't know. I mean, I've projected like
no, I just feel like some black men are pretty angry. They're angry at black women because of the way that their mothers have treated them, and they've belittled them, and that's why their interaction with women are the way that they are. Like,
can you prevent that cat from ruining this microphone here? Interesting.
Yeah, that's.
Do you think it has more to do with just sort of direct interpersonal interactions?
Mm-hmm. Because I feel like, I mean, even if you're in a, I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't really know how other, like, I'm sure like other races mothers are very intense, but like I feel like like having a black mother is like so intense. Like it's like the worst bully. Like my mother's like the worst bully you can ever imagine. Like just someone that constantly just talks about you, and I'm just like, why? Like I don't understand why you target me. And
right. Well, that's a generation, like
yeah.
that schism is so massive, and I've been like time and time again like astounded at how blind that generation is to us, and to the way that like we have a humanity that's like different than the way they imagine us. We're kind of like invisible to them except for as like certain functions or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just weird, and I think that because of that, it's just, yeah, that's, and I feel like if you're a black male, and if you have a single, and you have a mother that's single, or you come from a single parent household, then most of the time, like, you kind of have to grow up really quickly, and you're kind of seen as the man of the household. Like basically, when I was growing up, like my parents, they were on drugs, and like they weren't really around, and because my brother was older, like he basically he kind of did things for me, and that put like a huge responsibility on somebody, and we're only 10 years apart.
Right.
So it's like, if you have to do that, and not even regardless of your parents not being there, or your mother works a lot, and it just puts like a huge responsibility on you. And as a child, like, you get that sense of entitlement because you have been doing things for yourself for a while, and it's like you're almost like an adult, and how can you tell me something when I've been doing this for myself?
Right. Right.
And
so a little bit of headstrong just
yeah.
because you have to be.
Yeah, and resentment.
Right.
And like, and it's hard to like accept things from people because, or even hard to like trust them because you had to like trust yourself for so long.
Would he like make sandwiches for you for school and stuff like that?
No, he showed me how to make eggs in the microwave because I one time I tried to make pancakes and I almost burnt the house down.
Oh no!
And I'm like, now that I think about it, I'm like, it's not that hard. Like, it's really not. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you don't know how young you were, but
I was like 7 or 8. Like, it is pretty hard with 7 or 8 year old, and like just things like that. Or like it's really like my first CD was Baduism. Like, the way he gave that to me, and he was
Erykah Badu.
Yeah. that was I guess like he gave that to me because I had like a whole bunch of, like, it was weird. He had posters of like Little Kim on his wall, and it was like this one poster, or this one picture of her, and like she had like her, I don't know if it was like her album cover, and she had her legs open, just like spread out, and she was wearing a bikini, and she had a fur coat on. And I think my mother made him take it down or something like that. But like, he tried to, like, he definitely was like a teenage boy, but he wasn't that like bad. Like, I feel like he somehow knew that women, not to disrespect women.
You said he always wanted a little sister.
Yeah. So he was always very respectful of women, and like, I don't know, like, I just feel like, yeah, it's just pretty cool, because I feel like there are choices, like when we were watching that documentary about the one that got away, about the boy that went to my high school, and they were referring to like kind of choices that he made, and like, but not really ever thinking about like, this is, and then they would go back and speak to someone, and you would kind of find out like, well, this is why. It's not that he didn't want to not show up to the school and like, right, for the assembly. His father wouldn't let him out, like, and they never really acknowledged that, like.
Yeah, I hated that documentary. I mean,
yeah,
it was so unaware of its racism. Like, the filmmaker was unaware that he was just anyway.
But
on PBS.
Yeah. Check it out. But yeah, it was, I think about that, and how just certain things in your life lead up to choices that you make, and it kind of leads up to the type of person that you wind up being eventually. And somehow the stars were aligned, and my brother didn't wind up being an asshole.
Right.
So like, but I think that just, or there was people, I feel like there were people in my life that happened to be there, and they kind of redirected me. And if there aren't people in your life like redirecting you, like, you're gonna just kind of gravitate towards things that may be fun, and things that may be fun are most of the times that aren't really the best things or healthy choices.
Or the type of thrill that you get when you're so emotionally numb might be something that's like really extreme.
Yeah. So like an example of that is I'm friends with someone on Instagram, and they recently got out of jail, and they were in jail for maybe like 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
But since they've gotten out of jail, like they've been drinking every day. They have a girlfriend, but they
This
basically,
is
yeah,
a guy.
yeah, guy. He has a girlfriend, and they go back and forth where they're arguing, and he puts on his page where he's like, oh, this is why I drink, because I want to numb my feelings. And it's like he was in jail where he probably wasn't able to like even acknowledge feelings, because like you can't do that in jail. He's coming out into like quote unquote like the real world or back into society, and he doesn't really have a good support system, and he's falling back into like the same habits, and like there's nobody redirecting him. And like I feel like in life, or there are people or these super masculine men where there's like people don't redirect them or check them or call them out on their what they're doing, so they never really, we just expect them to know. And if no one's ever corrected them, that is the correct habit, or that's the correct
Right.
reaction.
It's just sort of.
Yeah.
It's just a. Yeah. I wouldn't. Well, personally, I'd use a different term than correct, but like show some love, and like steering
Yeah.
towards
That's
things
on,
that are
yeah,
like
that's on like redirect is better.
yeah,
like,
but yeah. Well, it's so painful because it's such a common story and a common phenomenon. People without a support system, sort of like
I
of
feel like they're about to fight.
oh, they're definitely about to fight. Those are cats, all right. Mini,
Cat fight.
quite literally. Well, yeah. Thank you. Is there any more we want to say? I feel like we're like barely brushing the surface on such a massive kind of like ongoing.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, that's what I just like observe in my reality. And it's like even with that situation, it's like, even though like I'm aware of it, I don't know how to like hey, because he knows who I am, and we weren't really close, but like we are like aware of each other. And I don't know how responsive he would be if I'm just like, hey, I can say, hey, how you doing? I feel like he would acknowledge that, but actually trying to like touch on something deeper, it probably wouldn't.
Yeah, it's so kind of challenging to actually develop deep relationships with people, but that's kind of what's required almost, for people to really feel like, okay, you're not someone who's like just gonna abandon me like the rest of everyone, or whatever. And I think there are, a lot of really, really well meaning people, I think that's actually the majority of us,
And yeah, and maybe that's why some guys are kind of like that, because people just expect men not to really have feelings and not really care. So
yeah, it's this incredible indoctrination that somehow like you're in a competition with the world, which hands down you've already lost if you're against the world, but like that's how it feels. I mean, like the kind of attitude that you have to be best or be strong or be, like this kind of like glorification of the individual, it's so easy to then like fetishize someone who's doing well, someone who's like, and in whatever light that is, if it's like a tech person, if it's a person in the drug game, if it's a person in, you know, music or what, you know. I know for me, I'm often like just watching successful filmmakers and I'm like, I'll never do that, and then you start hating yourself, you know. It's like, well, it's so easy to, you know, just like pick out the least accessible, you know, and just be like, okay, I suck, you know, and
Yeah.
like feel that. And I feel like there's so I mean, you know, there's a lot of people clamoring towards like self-love, and so, you know, like you being very kind of like supportive and oriented towards, you know, building yourself up and telling people to build themselves up. And, you know, I think that's really, really, really important, that people are more vocal about that. But it's still really easy to, you know, be hard on yourself.
It is. Like,
And to harbor resentment and to hold on to grudges and things like that.
it is. Like, yeah, because, like, it's just easier, but it's really not, because I mean, in the moment it feels easier to hold a resentment, but it takes a lot of energy.
Oh, yeah.
because it just takes energy to hate, and
And you
the
kind of
focus on you're focusing on someone that
else
yeah, and
in a negative way, where it's sort of like it is an incredibly difficult thing to do, to stop that like immediate reaction, you know, before it blows into something bigger, and shift your attention and focus to something that's nourishing, or, you know, like positive or whatever, you know, hanging out with a friend.
yeah,
You know.
it's definitely hard to do in the moment, especially when it's a heated moment,
Yeah.
and all you want to do is respond to that moment, and you just have to, like,
And you know it'll play in your head a million times. And whatever,
yeah.
you know, and it pisses you the fuck off.
But yeah, I feel like social media and just not acknowledging. I think if we acknowledge that men have feelings, that would be helpful. That would maybe transition to men being less misogynistic and actually talking about their feelings and what's going on. Because I mean, they have them, so
Right,
like
right.
I don't.
The like reaching a point where you feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable with someone
Mm-hmm.
and share is you know, the threshold when you're holding on to something like that you think is your whole identity because you're spiting someone or you hate or whatever. Like the threshold to getting from that mentality, and you might be hating on yourself even, you know, to a point of like, oh, I can talk with this person, and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's often really, really big, and only happens, it's only something you can like, you can only reach that point of sharing over time, where you're sharing little bits of, you know, how you're feeling with you know, in different contexts, at a bar with a friend,
Yeah.
you know, with a therapist, if you have one, you know, with your family, with whomever.
And I think it's even weird how, like, guys kind of like show affection like to each other. It's mostly like hitting each other, and I'm like, I don't understand that.
Well, homophobia is a toxic organizing tool that capitalism has built into like what an idea of being male is. And so men reach a point where they are taught that they can't be affectionate with other men, otherwise they're being gay. And that instantly like permeates throughout like a bunch of like any guy who idolizes women as like romantic partners, like, and decides that they're, you know, the worst thing in the world would be to be perceived as gay, like builds that exact,
Yeah,
like it's like a print, you know,
it
it's like
just
robot like way of thinking you have to relate, where it's like, oh yeah, well the only way to relate with one another is by being
yeah,
machismo. You
yeah, like
know,
punching each other in the
it's
penis. Like I'm like, like that's
it's so dumb, it's
yeah. I'm
incredible.
like, you're actually not. I don't know. Like you just touched his penis. Like I don't know.
Well that but
Like
that's the
whatever you're trying to do, you're actually doing it.
that's
So.
the that's the kind of paradoxical undercurrent, though, is
Hmm.
that because it represses affection between men, it actually creates a really homoerotic um, dynamic
Yeah.
that like doesn't necessarily like ever surface, because you know it's the homoeroticism like comes from being like emotionally repressed. You know, it's like it's a dynamic that's sort of completely um, unhealthy in its sort of like origin. You know.
So what age is it not okay for little boys to hug? Cuz like they
Oh, it starts early. You know,
like
like
I feel like they hug until they're like 4 or 5 maybe.
right, yeah, at 7 they're aware of like this kind of, and it's a systematic type of like education, uh, uh, and it's a political education. People wouldn't describe it like that, but it's this kind of like societal kind of like constant type of like psychological uh uh this is how you behave, this isn't how you behave, in order to match the idea of masculine. And it's, and you know, terms like man up and all that are just generally accepted as like, you know, people know what that means or whatever, when it's like really pretty idiotic like language that like also doesn't mean anything.
No, I'm like, but what is that?
It's like all it projects to me is like a crow, you know, making its feathers on its head go like all red and Virgo, you know, like just walking around strutting like, oh look, it manned up.
No, it's like a Pokemon where it evolves
Right,
and
yeah.
like basically, yeah.
But
It's
that's
turning into something like I guess the human form of manning up is when your veins start to show more
right.
and you're more angry.
But it's
Like,
right, exactly, and it's very specific in that regard of like, oh, it's just become more of your own like egotism. Like, don't. It's not like, you know, become more gentle or listen more or like relate more deeply or like, you know,
mm-hmm.
will yourself, you know, to kind of like uh, follow through on an aspiration. You know, um, it's like a bluff. You know, more than anything, it's like puffing your chest and being like,
Yeah, it definitely
that's what it
instills
evokes for
more
me.
violence. Like
Right,
it's perpetuates more violence.
right.
And yeah, and I don't and it's just like a very weird society where to show that you're more of a man you have to disrespect women to like I don't.
Yeah, well, that's part of this also sort of like homophobic kind of mental framework where like you're you're proving yourself as like heterosexual by,
By hurting someone
well,
else. Like,
by winning something over. So like a woman's body is something that sort of like a territory to achieve rather than like be like, oh, we're just two people. You know, um and there's anyway more to say about that, but you started this criticism with actually talking about um women and their role in sort of perpetuating. I'm curious
yeah,
if you have more to say about that.
so I started that because I feel like it's almost like a
self-fulfilling
Yeah,
prophecy.
it is. Yes, I was gonna say that because, well, not even as it's like a vicious cycle because we create the problem not evolves, but the problem grows up. It yeah, the problem evolves and evolves into something that we don't like. It becomes basically a monster that we can't control, and we blame the monster for being bad, but we created that monster. So and then it kind of
Do you think women accept abuse, um, or like to kind of feed the beast with the language you're using, but like be accommodating to men in a way that relates to sort of their own self belittlement and like
it
not
kind of goes back to just like roles. I feel like gender roles in society where I mean women are free to we're free to do everything a man can do, but like it's we still have that mentality where we have to be subservient to men. I feel like, and we've grown out of that, but there's still some things that just inherently we still do today. Like constantly you'll see on like constant debates you'll see on Facebook about who like serving your husband first and your children before yourself, or like getting plates for people. I'm like, I'm not getting I'm not like
right.
getting any food for anybody. Like I will let you know it's done. And I mean I'll put the food like on the plate, but you can like come and get it.
The patriarchal societies are so backwards that actually during famines, it's more important in a society structured that way, like ours is, it's more important to reaffirm the status than it is to give people who need nourishment the most. Women, this was an observed phenomenon during the Irish famine. Women would prepare food and cut food to serve to the man of the household, and the man would eat and not the women and children, when biologically women need, especially when malnourished, need more than men do, and children who are developing need more than adult men. And it's a status thing that's like asserted by this like male is better or more important. It's a hierarchy.
Yeah.
Male is above female, and that hierarchy dynamic is reproduced a million times over in a million any sort of way where it can be asserted, and it's pretty thorough, and it's pretty gross. That's like where like the men making of like women making 80 cents to the dollar or whatever like comes from. Like it's a valuation that's arbitrary and only reproduces itself because anytime anything that threatens the dynamic is attacked, you know. Anyway.
No, I was looking for this book and I found it. It's called The Game. Have you ever heard of it?
I've seen a film called The Game, but what?
So it's by Neil Stratus. It's a story about he's a pickup artist, and basically it details how to pick up women. And like in the book, he's like giving examples like carry a picture of yourself or something and tell women you're a model, or basically like ignore a woman or make her
Be manipulative, basically.
Basically manipulate women and they will come to you. That's what this book is about.
It's such an indoctrination and an idiotic like delusion that like that men, like wide, I mean, like far and wide have that attitude. And it's pretty profound that like they believe that shit. You know, it's like so difficult for people to just see other people with the same subjectivity as they see the world themselves, you know, like that simple kind of just like, oh yeah, well, you know, like I can imagine, you know, they did that thing for some reason that I don't know, but I wouldn't do that thing, but they did it and they seem like they're doing it while being happy. Like that's fine. You know, like just being okay with other people seems like beyond so many folks.
Yeah, it's, but I don't like I don't understand the whole manipulation. I mean, you definitely see it more at, well, I guess it definitely happens every day, but it's, I guess it's more subtle and just like the workforce or things like that. But like in clubs at bars, they're like definitely,
Hmm.
it's definitely more obvious. And it's more obvious from the like the way that one, that people dress and what they choose to wear or flaunt, and they're, yeah, like they're promoting the best things about themselves. And for you, that is the point of the club, to, I feel like, to eventually to get someone to go home with, or to talk to someone, yeah, to talk to someone, or to get someone to go home with, or to just meet someone and to like have fun for the night. And you do
And to
those,
look good. I mean,
yeah,
like
I
I think
mean,
there's like a
to look good. I mean, you do that for yourself. Like, you don't have to really go to the club to do that. You could just look good. but but yeah, the club is weird like that, and I just feel like it just, it's like a real life Facebook. I feel like the club for me.
hmm.
It's, people are just promoting the best things about themselves, and they'll like you'll wear like your best clothes and things like that, and you'll look your best, but like you might be like living in a box or something. Like it's just, you might have a really bad situation after you leave this club, but this is what's going on in the here and now. And I feel like the club is also the only place where people are kind of in the moment too, because nothing really matters outside of it, which is also interesting.
Yeah, huh. So you're relating this to like that book basically,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, because I feel like the club and actually there's a lot of good things about, you know, it's not like clubbing is happening much these days, but like
No.
there's a lot of good things about, you know, in person kind of interactions that are uh, lost in social media, but also there's a lot of pressures and weird sort of like dynamics that come out of like you know, people are in a place for different reasons, you know.
Yeah.
um, but you know, it's something that I feel like is human and common and happened throughout history. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, though the toxic, like, I mean, the experience is so different depending on gender and body type and, you know, appearance and all of it.
Yeah, it's just really I mean, I don't know if it's, I guess yes, it is getting better, because of course women have more rights, so it is getting better, but it's just like racism, it's more, the things that do happen against women or different genders are more covert now. They're not really out
Yeah,
and
they're
yeah, they're
but they're
not,
still happening.
yeah, they're not,
Absolutely.
people aren't like
Well,
saying you can't work here because you're a woman, but they'll like just do things
right,
that
right.
make it hard for you to work there.
Yeah, well, the power dynamics have not changed
Mm-hmm.
since I, you know, since growing up and like becoming conscious of all of this shit. You know, it's sort of like, wow, this world is exactly like it used to be, and you know, it's weird, you know, to see sort of like the rolling phenomenon of the extremes, you know, that are happening, like DC, you know, 2 days ago with the white supremacist group burning Black Lives Matter like
Why did that?
poster and shit.
What happened with that?
Yeah, the Proud Boys type of like Trump supporter extremists who are still in denial about Biden's election. You know, like that the face of like the extremes is is I guess a new phenomenon, not necessarily new in its sort of like foundation, but like new in the sense of it sort of much more it desires
Yeah.
to be public, you know.
Yeah, I feel well. Technology is something that makes it more magnified, and I feel like I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing because like before, if something like that happened, it would probably just be on your local news, and it would just be something that's known locally. Now it's something that's can be known globally,
Right, right.
which makes it.
And it's a moment in one place that sort of like is massively amplified, but out of context also, which actually I think feeds the fire somewhat, you know, sort of like,
It does
you know,
because then it's shared and it just depending on and also edited and depending on how it edited or how it's viewed or how much someone viewed of it or if any of it's explained or if it's a news clip or whatever, people are just going to digest it in whatever way, and then it just creates more of a problem.
right. Yeah, I mean, you know, it was interesting to talk with some people in Baltimore uh, about, you know, just how uh, you know, there's a few murders throughout the country that are given national attention, but there are constant murders going on, you know, every week, every day in Baltimore that, like, you know, really have no story, you know, in much beyond just a small blip in local news or whatever. But, like, yeah, we were just talking about that one Instagram page that shows sort of all the there is a I have a sort of like aversion to even really the kind of like gore kind of like fascination that people have that draws people to like seek out some of that stuff. But
Is it like like actual picture or is it like police footage or
it's representative
oh,
photos. It's not.
okay.
It doesn't necessarily. I mean, you know, it showed. I just saw like the face of some woman who's brutalized and bruised, and um, you know, that was a couple days ago. Someone had
What was that? But yeah, things like that. I feel like that also desensitizes us
mm-hmm.
because we're seeing things like technology, like the Proud Boys, like that's serious. But because we are seeing it so much, because it's shared so much, we're like, oh, it's just like it's happening again.
Well, it fetishizes the symptom of the problems
Yeah.
rather than actually dealing and engaging with real problems. You know, it's like this whole, you know, like gun-toting kind of like uh, celebration of guns is like, you know, like that is a celebration of a symptom of a problem, which is like, you know, mental health issues and, you know,
Yeah.
like what we were saying earlier, you know, about sort of toxic masculinity and, you know, like just much deeper rooted kind of like people being human and struggling with it, you know, um, and there not being resources to help us all cope, you know. Um,
Yeah. It's like, but if that was any type of protest or march for Black Lives Matter, like there would be like plyboards going up on buildings and things like that. Like I feel like there's not if they're burning a flag, they can come back and there's not the same preparation or fear that there would be and with them for whatever reason, like I don't understand why it's not the same fear. Like
You talk about
with the
like the
proud,
police?
for businesses and for the police.
Oh, right, right. Well, they benefit from. I mean, white supremacy functions in a way that protects, like the even the people who are just corporate, but benefiting from white supremacy, like are actually pretty politically aligned with Proud Boys, though they would never be that extreme with it, right? And so, like, the cops, hurt anti-protest, like the people who are there, like in protest of the Proud Boys. The cops, like, are still figuring out if there had been any hate crimes from the Proud Boys.
Yeah,
Like,
it's just like,
it's because of the white supremacist bullshit.
and things like that that's in the media. It's just like it just it just like perplexes me how like people can't see that. Like how can't you see all these things that are right in front of you? Like you're saying that just the reaction alone, that should just be a red flag to people that something is not right. Like something is going, like why, it should make people question the same way I'm questioning, like even though it's obvious, like, and it should make them angry. It should make them want to observe the cops more and question them and be less trustful and make everyone kind of come together and say, hey, like this is a problem.
Right.
Like there is favoritism, there is.
Well, right. Well, it's. I mean, what people don't really acknowledge, right, is that like they have a delineation between currencies that doesn't actually acknowledge like what really is a currency. So like whiteness is a currency, and uh, if you're black, it's like you are, you know, uh, dollars from a country in Africa in an American, US dollar exchange. Like in relation to whiteness, like you have no currency.
Yeah,
You have nothing to, there's nothing to use
it's
and
not
spend.
yeah.
And like that's because it's designed around anti-blackness, which is because of the history, it's because it's always been designed around it when it was especially exploitative, of labor, with slavery, but it's still fucking exploitative
It is,
of
and it's like
it's
it's the same.
basically still
Yes, it's
slavery.
still it's the same thing. It's just like maybe here and there, politicians will fight for. They'll just like give, as a whole. It's not even acknowledging the systematic racism because as a whole they're giving the country a little bit of a boost, and then
But they're not. I mean,
they're
like
not. It's like it's a little.
it's pretty
It
astounding.
basically, it's like it is kind of like the thing we were talking about earlier, where putting something like a string on a dollar, and just like letting someone walk past and always just pulling the string, and the person can never like,
Grab that
yeah,
dollar,
never,
right?
they're always chasing that dollar, and I feel like that's.
I was
I was
watching congressmen today congratulate themselves for finding unity around giving a, a stimulus check or something.
Oh,
And
they made a decision.
I don't know that they did,
like,
but they like were finding some common ground, and it was just the most disgusting thing to see all these white dudes, old white dudes who have literally just denied all of America support for the duration of a pandemic, then masturbate in front of everybody by saying,
yeah.
"Oh, here, look how great we are,"
It's like
and it's just like, fuck you.
we waited to the very last minute because unemployment is going to end in January. Like we're basically, and the government is going to shut down again. It's
Right.
very soon. So it's like we're not doing you a favor. We had to come to this decision, or there's probably going to be people at this door burning this building down.
Well, that's
like,
what's confusing to me is that like people aren't, and that's what's sort of astounding is like actually, so the design of like wealth in this country is so like it's just resides at this sweet spot where like enough people are okay, like, and it seems like now more than ever, you know, it should be a mass of people
Yeah.
coming together and being like, what the fuck, this is so screwed up. I mean, like, people are, you know, living in their cars. um so many fucking homeless people, so many people are now out of work for, you know, and like, and yet because there's so much wealth in this country and a history of it, you know, there's essentially enough to placate the population from like coming together in like a political entity that actually benefits us, you know.
I was just thinking today, like, so like our deficit is like about $1 trillion. I don't know.
I think it went up a full like something trillion with
Okay.
Trump. Like,
So
it's
it's in the it's but it is in the trillion. And like Jeff Bezos is a trillionaire. Like he basically has our whole
right,
deficit.
right, right, right,
Like
right,
that's he could pay our whole deficit.
right.
And like, or you can think about it like he
And
contributes to our deficit, and that's like,
right, exactly.
it's just
He's
he is
stolen.
the
He
deficit.
holds the. He
Like,
holds that. Yeah, that's
like,
our money. Well, yeah, but
but
you know,
it's really weird that that I mean, I feel like at this point when things happen like that, people are just so grateful, and they're just at the point where they're gonna take the crumbs because they've been struggling so much. And I don't know, like,
but yeah, like that's it's such a it's I don't know. The image I get in my mind is of someone full able-bodied, you know, deciding that they should crawl on the ground and eat the little crumbs off of the ground. Like, we as a population are so much, we don't tap our capacity
no, we don't.
whatsoever. And you know, like, the it's by design. I mean, you know, that's why we're bombarded with advertisements for you know, objects,
Yeah.
and for, you know, like, uh entertainment stuff. Like, it placates us, you know.
People
You
are quick to be in line for the newest iPhone, but they don't care about what's really going on in their lives. And it's
Well, like, I really feel like the political edge.
but what started Occupy Boston, Occupy Wall Street? I don't
Well,
remember
it
what.
was organized around like the 1%, like, getting, but it was after or during the 2008 financial crisis,
Okay.
where essentially, like, basically the American people gave CEO bankers
And that's
a
when
whole
the
bunch of
housing
money.
crisis started, and the banks had to be bailed out,
Right, and we just
and we
did,
had a recession.
and it's like you know, like, I get why people don't like taxes in this context, you
Mm-hmm.
know, but it's only in this context where, like, they steal our money and do like, and fund
So
war, you know,
yes,
like, yeah, I
so
don't want to
yeah,
fund war with my money. No, you don't get that. But, you know, if I'm funding, if I've, you know, I'm like, actually, like, oh yeah, well, I lived in Baltimore back in 2020, like, you should have seen it then. But now, like, we have these amazing schools and, like, communities involved in the education, you know, system, and just like, it's a beautiful place, you know, like, to see it turn around because government is actually doing something positive, which it's so capable of doing, if it's steered in that direction and has like if it redirects. This is why defund the police is like one sort of like, yeah, it's defund a very useless, I mean, it's not utterly useless, but it's,
the funds need to be redirected,
yeah,
to different
redistributed.
resources that can better handle things that the cops can't.
Right.
But I think that just like people were so enraged by taxes for Occupy Wall Street, why at this point we have kind of So I feel like also maybe COVID is maybe there would be an Occupy Wall Street
Oh, for
maybe
sure.
situation if COVID wasn't a thing
Well, the
too.
sort of
Yeah.
Antifa is like the modern equivalent at the moment. Um, but like, yeah, I mean, COVID is has created a kind of profound. Um,
It's created the situation, the problem why we are in here, but it's also a situation why we can't really congregate together
right.
to.
I think that there is like a. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see where this
But I
country
mean,
goes. But
if I was a computer hacker, like I would hack into things. Like,
right,
why don't they do that?
right.
Like, just saying, you can do that. You have my permission.
Yeah.
Like,
Hack into whom
yeah,
specifically?
exactly.
Bezos's bank accounts? Yeah, they're they're in the Swiss Alps.
Like,
All right. Well, I think this is a great conversation. We'll post it tomorrow. Question: should we mask our voices or should we just have? Because I fucked around with the voices yesterday. Could.
yeah, as long as it doesn't sound like crazy, like we're bank robbers or something.
You should listen to the one today and tell me.
Okay.
But all right.